All right. Hey, everybody. In this lecture today, I'm going to kind of wrap up the introduction to this class and actually start into some of the substantive issues as well. So let me, what I'm going to do first is I'm going to pull up some slides. So let me swing this around so you can see that. All right. So from here, I'll do is I'll present this page and we'll just go through some of these slides. A lot of these are introductions, kind of, this slide is introduction of me, just so you kind of see where it is that I'm coming from. So these three slides kind of represent three different phases of my legal career. This first picture is it's a picture of Bill Larac. He was my first boss, and I was just starting law school. I was looking for legal experience, and I went to the local LDS Employment Center in San Diego because at the time it was right before law school started, and I was stocking shelves at Target, which was fine, but I kind of wanted to get into a law firm, and like regardless of what I was doing, I thought that'd be a good experience. So when I went to the employment center, the director came out and he just gave me a piece of paper that he had listed the top 25 law firms in San Diego. And number one was the biggest, and then it just kind of went smaller from there. And it had numbers on it. And he just sat me down. He said, all right, start calling every one of these. And I asked him, I was like, wouldn't it be better if I just emailed? And he looked at me like I was an idiot and was like, yeah, I'm going to call. So he gave me a phone. He had this landline right there. And so I picked that up and I just started calling. And the first firm was Latham Watkins, and they said they'd have somebody get back to me. The second firm was this firm, Larac Coughlin. And I called and I said, I'm starting law school. I'd like some experience. And the secretary said, oh yeah, you need to talk to Brad. And she just patched me through to somebody. And he said, yeah, can you come in today? And so I ran in and I got a job offer like the next day. I was a document clerk, and basically what that meant is I got coffee for the lawyers. I hung up diplomas for some attorneys in their offices. I ran legal documents, mostly complaints, and these documents that initiate a lawsuit to the courthouse, which was just down the street. And it was a great experience. So that was my first kind of foray into the legal world. I didn't stay there because the partners all started. Well, let me say this. Bill Larac went to jail while I was still in law school. And it's this interesting issue of client solicitation and potential fraud and a lot of these things. So he ended up going to jail. I just decided I'm gonna get out of here. So I went. My first job out of law school was this firm called Beard St. Clair. They've got an office here in Rexburg and in Idaho Falls. I worked there about a year. Loved it. They did corporate law, well, business law. Not a whole lot of corporations around here in Idaho, but LLCs and just kind of other business issues. So I did that for a bit. And then I thought Idaho was quite cold. So we got out of here and we went to Orlando. And we were in Orlando for about 5 years. And that's where I represented some businesses in the vacation industry. And I loved that until an opportunity came to come to BYU Idaho and teach, and it was that point that I jumped out and I ended up here teaching. So that's just kind of a fun little slide about my career path. This here is my family. So here on the left, this is a picture of Laura's graduation. So Laura got a degree because we met during undergrad. I studied English and business, and she studied communications, mostly because She was pregnant with Jessica and just needed a degree to graduate. She wanted that degree. So so she went into communications, wrapped that up fairly quickly, and um, and yeah, for the last, what is it, 15 years, 10, 15 years since she graduated, um, we had all of these kids, like a million kids. Jessica was actually born my very first day of law school. So this is her right here, if you can see that. Um, and and um, and then yeah, Chandler came during my last year of law school. Ben and Danny down there at the bottom, they were born in Florida. And then Evan was born when we moved back here to start teaching. So Evan's 3. This other picture is Jessica and I. We kind of got into trail running last summer and had a lot of fun with that. So this is us on one of our, we did this 20-mile run, basically from the trail where you start Table Rock, kind of ran over Hurricane Pass and down into Jenny Lake on the other side. And so that's actually quite fun. We're looking forward to doing it again this summer. Yeah, back to Laura. Once we were here, she kind of thought about going back to work, but realized a communication degree is, I'm not going to say it's worthless. So she decided to go back to school and she got a nursing degree. So now she works at the hospital. She does, she works in the NICU and the mom baby unit, and she loves that. So that's the family right there. All right, speaking of mountains, this is kind of a fun thing that I started doing last year. So this is a group of us. We went up to the top of Table Rock, and we did this the Saturday before before finals. Excuse me. And this is kind of a tough hike. It's about 10 to 14 miles, depending on which route you take to the top. But these are the students from the class that went with us last year. My kids were all behind me. And if we can pull this off, if there's enough of you here local, we might try this again in July. What I'll do is I'll just tell you I'm going. If you want to go, meet me at this trailhead at 7 a.m. or something. You can come if you want to. But this is kind of a fun way to get more connected with the students in the class, especially where most of us are spread all over the country right now. All right. Now normally I'd show this clip from Legally Blonde. I'll send you these slides so that you can watch this clip if you want to. But Legally Blonde is this kind of funny movie about a girl that goes to law school at Harvard and kind of her transition and finding herself in law school. And a great scene is this first day of, I think it's civil procedure in this clip. And the teacher is all about scaring the students and and this happens in law school. This happened in my section. A kid right next to me got called on, and the teacher started asking questions and additional questions and very probing questions about a case. And the poor kid next to me was just sweating profusely, had no idea what was going on, and dropped out of law school because of it. It was kind of a sad story. And usually I show this clip just to let you know that I'm not going to do that to you in an undergrad business law class. I'll challenge you, but I'm not going to try to make you feel stupid. So there you go. Moving on here, if I can. This clip or this slide right here, I usually just pull up because when people think of corporate law or business law, this is usually what they think of. This is a promo picture from the show Suits, and it depicts a fictional law firm in New York and their business law dealings. Kind of an interesting show. In fact, a little interesting tidbit here. I did a study about a year ago. It was a year and a half ago. And I asked my students if they watch Suits and what their grade was. So it's kind of self-reported. but there was a very strong correlation between students that watch Suits and those that get an A in this class. So just kind of random, bizarre story, but Suits is interesting because it while it's fictional and the underlying premise of the show is rather ridiculous, where Mike, the guy in the lightish blue suit here on your screen, didn't go to law school, forged his way into the New York bar, and yet, even though he didn't go to law school, he's brilliant and probably one of the best attorneys in the state. I mean, that's just silly. You can't do that. So the underlying premise is silly, but the every episode usually, at least early on, depicts some very common business legal issues that law firms and business clients often face. And so I think with that background, I think some students, I think it helps things click a little sooner, and they do quite well in the class. So plus you saw a picture similar to this that I put up on our Facebook page. I'm claiming that I'm Harvey with a mustache. And Brandon, you can be Lewis Litt because you're smart. Although Brandon isn't a jerk like Lewis Litt is, so it doesn't really fit. All right, here's a couple things I want you to get out of this class. First, I want you to start thinking like a lawyer. I want you to be very analytical. I want you to see both sides, and I think that's an important part of this class. Gospel principles, how they apply to common business situations. This we will see throughout the class, typically in our case studies that we do on Fridays. We will be discussing the ethical issues and gospel principles and how to recognize and make decisions based on what you know to be true, correct, and right. All right, obviously understand legal issues facing business, know how to analyze those legal issues. Those are the main things that I want you to get out of the class. Now, as far as participation, I'll have you sign up as experts. Now, like I mentioned in our first class, I'm going to have to do this differently than I normally do. So experts, I'll send you out a Word document or a Google Doc where you will be able to sign up for different weeks. And in that week, I would like you to post articles that you find that are pertinent to what we're studying that week, and have a discussion on Facebook with other students about what you found out and what insights that you gained into that legal principle for the week. I think that's going to be, we're just going to have to adapt, and that's one of the things that I'm going to have you do. All right, as far as the reading, we went over the new textbook and assigned articles during the first class, so let's not worry about that. All right, let me jump out of this slide and present one more right here. This slide right here comes from an article that I used to have students read, and the title was Working Effectively with Counsel. It's an important article about why businesses should utilize business attorneys and how business attorneys can add value to their business clients. And I think this is especially important right now. You see this during every economic downturn. Lawyers get let go. And if not let go, their hours are decreased. Why? Because, well, if, like, for example, Marcus Neiman? I'm mixing it up. The company, the fashion company that's looking to file bankruptcy probably in the next month. If they have no cash, no cash with which to pay their attorneys, their attorneys are not going to be authorized to do legal work for them unless it's a bankruptcy. And so we're seeing this right now. We definitely saw it 10 years ago during the last economic downturn. And so, yeah, we're kind of back there right now. And what this article does, I'll just give you kind of the main gist as I see it, is that attorneys should look at themselves as income generators as well. And that's an important part, because often attorneys it's almost like, especially corporate attorneys, we look at ourselves as a necessary expense. But if a corporate attorney can become an asset, an income generator, then that's going to be extremely valuable for the business itself. Coca-Cola saw this early on when Coca-Cola had created the formula for the drink Coca-Cola, and they were kind of wondering how they should protect that valuable asset, that what we call intellectual property, that formula for creating a drink that lots of people started liking initially because it had cocaine in it. And they could have patented it, but under recommendation from their attorney, they didn't do that. They made it a trade secret, thereby expanding the time period which they can keep that formula protected. Again, we'll talk about this when we get to patents, but when you patent something, it's only protected for a limited amount of time, after which anybody else can copy it. And so by keeping it a trade secret, which as long as you keep it a trade secret, that can last forever, Coca-Cola has saved billions, maybe trillions of dollars off of that decision. Pier 39, this is a real estate development venture in San Francisco. And this is also probably too complicated to get into right now, but the attorneys allowed a corporate deal to go through that satisfied the law, but also kind of fit the needs of the buyers and the sellers in this transaction. It was somewhat novel, and that's another great example of attorneys looking for solutions. And I like this because corporate attorneys also get the bad rap for being just saying no often. And often that's warranted. I've worked for many businesses that have wanted to do things that are illegal, or at least extremely borderline, like beyond my comfort level of in their aggressive stance. And one time this actually happened to me. We'll talk about this later on in the semester, but I had a company that wanted to start a new subsidiary, and the name that they chose for this business was one that would not be protected under trademark law. And we'll get into why later, but initially I just went and I thought, I'm going to go in and tell them, no, they're idiots. You can't trademark this company name. You're wasting everybody's time. Figure it out. And then I thought about this article and I thought, you know what? I don't want to be that attorney. Like, why don't I go in there with a solution? So I went in with an ingenious name, like a new corporate name for this new corporation that would be, you could trademark, and it was more catchy. The URL, so the web domain was available for this other name. Like, it was perfect. And when I went in and pitched it, they were like, you know what, you're just an attorney. That's a dumb name. And they totally brushed it aside. Well, somebody in that room was smart because they listened to me. They must have left that meeting and started their own company with the name that I've said, and bought the URL, and now it's a successful business. Whereas that original business that wasn't able to be trademarked, that's languished and hasn't gone anywhere. So there you go. Me doing my best there. Again, Enron is an interesting case study because anytime that there's a corporate scandal, one of the first questions asked is, where were the lawyers? And if I, let's see, here we go. One article that you'll read this first week is the Volkswagen. This is the diesel scam, the adjusting the numbers to make it look as if VW diesel engines got greater gas mileage than they actually did. And the question, again, there, like in Enron and in WorldCom and now Theranos, is always like, where were the lawyers when all of this was going on? And I like this VW article because it gives a good hypothesis of where the attorneys may have been in that corporate scandal. All right. Oh, that's a fun one. We'll skip that one. I'll do this a little bit. And the question here is, and this is more of an ethical question, an ethical concern, but I think it ties into the class, because one of the main purposes of this class, one of the things that I want you to do is to think critically, think about different arguments for and against, and make a decision based on that. So let me kind of start at the beginning here. That I think this will make more sense. This image, by the way, I think it's from like Back to the Future or something. I'm not entirely sure what this is from, but it fits our purposes pretty well. And to understand this, I think I have to take you back into my own past and tell you about my grandpa. My grandpa he lives in Las Vegas now. Grew up in southern Utah, and he's a great singer and a guitar player. And it just seems like every time, so I grew up in California, but we were in Vegas all the time to visit family. Both sets of grandparents were in Las Vegas and lived very close to each other. And Grandpa would sing to me a lot, and he'd get on his guitar, and I just remember, this is one of my early childhood memories, is him singing songs. And one of those songs was interesting because it traumatized me. And it's this idea that there was a switch operator, a rail switch operator in the middle of nowhere, right? And he lived there with his family, and every day it was his job to move the switch and the switch, because it's 2020, some of us don't know what this is. Rail cars, the trains, as they're coming down the tracks, you may have different tracks, and if you switch it, then it'll like you've seen this in movies where it like switches the tracks and it'll head down a different track. That's a switch operator. So that's what this guy did. And in this song, talks about how much he loved he had a son. This was his only son. This pride and joy and life and everything else. And that every day the son would bring the dad a sandwich and his lunch, and they would eat together, and it was a special time for father and son. But to get to his father, the son would have to walk across a bridge. And one day, here comes the son, right? And he's walking across a bridge. Imagine a bridge like this image that you're seeing right now, but completed all the way across. And here comes the son walking, just skipping along with his dad's lunch here, just so excited to see his father again. And at that moment, the father hears the whistle, the whistle of the train coming down the tracks. And if the train continues as it's scheduled, it will go across this bridge and his son will die. There's no way for his son to live. It's so high, and there's no place to like hide or whatever. Now the father has a choice. If he switches the tracks, he could send it down another set of tracks. But the problem with that other set of tracks is that it goes across a bridge that's not completed. And so if he saves his son, he'll send this train filled with people, by the way, I should say, down a second set, and everybody on the train will die. 100 people will die as they plunge to their death. And in this song, I remember thinking, like being kind of worried, right? Because initially, when I heard this, I thought, the son is me. Like, I'm the kid. I'm coming to see my dad or my grandpa or whatever. Like, I associated myself with the child. And so I thought, Grandpa's going to save me. This is great. But that's not how it happened. In the song, the father with tears in his eyes lets the train go along its allotted path and sacrifices his son, basically, to save everybody on the train. Well, you see, now I get it. This is an allegory. This is a Christ allegory. I get it now, right? But at the time, all I knew is that if given the chance, my grandpa would kill me. It just scared me to death, right? So really did. It traumatized me. So let me mess with you a little bit. We're going to change things around here, but I want you to think about this. Listen, you're the switch operator now, and um, instead of having, let me come back to this. Instead of having one completed and one incomplete bridge, you've got two completed bridges, but you've got two sets of people working on each. On one set, on one train track here, you've got the local beehives, well, whatever we call them now, the young women, 12 to 13-year-old young women. Now forget, like, you're like, why are beehives, or why are 12-year-old girls working on a railway? Forget, like, throw logic out the door here for a little bit. Work with me. And here are all these 12-year-olds, little pigtails and their sundresses, cleaning up. Yeah, they're picking up litter along the train track bridge. It makes sense in my mind. Doing their service project for the week. Now on the other bridge, you've got the chain gang. This is the local state penitentiary inmates working on that bridge, also cleaning up litter, let's say. And no trains are scheduled, but you hear the whistle. Here comes a train. Now, if you leave the tracks as they are, the train will head down and kill all of the young women, 12-year-old girls. If you switch it, it will turn the tracks, head down the other bridge, at which point it will kill all of the convicted felon inmates. And the question is, what do you do? Well, this one, like, if we were in class, this is where I do a quick top hat poll. And usually it's about half and half. Well, most people, 6, maybe 60 to 70% will say, I'm going to switch it and kill the inmates. The other are going to say, I'm going to let it go on its path and kill the beehives. And the answers to this are always quite interesting. I want you to think about what you would do and justify. Why would you make that choice? And the answers vary quite a bit. Many students have a problem with switching the tracks because it's something about that affirmative action of taking the switch and pulling it and sending it down a new path that's going to kill other people. That bothers a lot of people. Some students ask that they want to clarify, like, how many beehives are there? How many inmates are there? And then they'll just pick whichever one is less, feeling like they saved somebody's life that way. But at that point, I clarify, like, there's 10 of each on each bridge, so equal in numbers. And then you get into this interesting discussion about, like, what's the value of a life of a beehive versus what's the value of the life of an inmate. And some students kind of key in on, like, potential earning value of the beehives is likely higher, whereas these convicted felons, that's a drain on the state, and that maybe that goes into their decision-making process of who dies. And that's that's usually where I kind of pull back and say, like, think about what you're saying now. Like you're making decisions based on economic value, and then some people get upset, and it's a really interesting discussion. And then I bring the law into it. Like where does the law stand on this? What the law expect you to do? And that brings up some interesting questions as well. We do talk about that, like, it is an affirmative action to pull that switch and send it down to kill the inmates. But it's also an affirmative action just to stand there and not pull the switch. It's a decision either way. And does the law differentiate between those two? It's a great kind of intersection of law and ethics, and just impossible situations. Now, at the end of this, I usually say, like, look, chill out. You're never going to be a switch operator. There's like 3 of them left in the country. Chances of you doing that after graduating from BYU, Idaho, are just not going to happen. And so, like I said, some people are upset. and this is a way to kind of calm them down. I often relate the story that my wife will, when we were first married, sometimes she would ask me questions like this and and ask what I would do. And usually it was like as I'm falling asleep, right? Like I'm tired, I had a long day, I'm trying to sleep. And I remember right after the tsunami in, what was that, Indonesia, or Thailand? I can't believe I can't remember that. But there was a huge tsunami about 15 years ago. And my wife said, like, look, if we're ever in a tsunami and you can only save me or our child, she's like, you better save the child, or something like that. And I remember just wondering, like, what what thought process had to happen to get my wife to bring that up right now at 11 at night when I'm like falling asleep. Anyways, interesting thing that sometimes my wife does. She thinks in terms of like worst case scenario and what would you do under these situations that like 0.0000001% of the human population will ever have to make. And yet sometimes it's interesting to think of these things, not so much because there's a right answer. Although with my wife, there was a right answer. She told me she'd kill me if I saved her and let a child die. So now I know that. But um, the real benefit of this is just to let the gears turn a little bit and see what would happen. So um, yeah, interesting little side discussion there. So with that, what I'm going to do is I want to talk a little bit about legal briefs, but I'm going to create a different video for that. So um, let me end this one right now and say welcome to the class one more time. I'm happy to have you here. This is going to be a different semester, but I think it'll be a good semester. So we'll make it happen. And stay tuned for my next video about how to write legal briefs.